Hello, my name is Dante Renee, and welcome to the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more. Like tonight's film, 1982's Cafe Flesh. This is 1982's Cafe Flesh. The creators of Night Dreams present a motion picture too hot for a world with a future. Yes, that's referring to a film that I reviewed on this YouTube page, also named Night Dreams from 1981. This is Cafe Flesh from 1982. The time, 5 years after the nuclear war. The survivors, post-nuke thrill freaks looking for a kick. This is the back of the DVD right here. And this DVD is an official DVD put out by VCA Interactive, VCA Classics DVD. I believe this is the only legitimate way to get it, but there might be some other ways. This is region free. I bought this off of CD Universe in their adult section. Cafe Flesh is one of those X-rated films that really throws open the doors and busts all boundaries on what an X-rated film can be and what a film in general can be. This is Cafe Flesh. If I look at a few films right here. Okay, if you took Forbidden Zone, which I've reviewed on this YouTube page, mix it with Liquid Sky, which I will be reviewing in the future, and you mix that with Blade Runner in an X-rated world, I believe you could have a piece of Cafe Flesh right here. Blade Runner, Liquid Sky, Forbidden Zone in an X-rated world. Cafe Flesh from 1982. And the interesting thing is that this was, it says directed and written, I believe, but directed by Rince Dream. Very, very interesting. But if you look him up on IMDb, you will see his real name. And but it's very interesting that in the credits for this and for Night Dreams, which I've also reviewed on this page, it is under Rince Dream. Interesting in for his credits. Let's get into Cafe Flesh here. This is a wild futuristic film. A futuristic film that deals with the effects of a nuclear wasteland, a nuclear world, in a totally different sexual type of way, where we have the majority of the population not able to have sex anymore. Almost makes them ill. And then you have a very, very minute amount of the population that can have sex. And these people are encouraged and are mostly working at a cafe named Cafe Flesh. And it's at this cafe that the people who can't have sex, they go just to visually suck in the sex that's happening on the stage, to take it in as much as possible, and then to leave and to come back the next night. This is their only sexuality, is what they're witnessing at Cafe Flesh. And the people on the stage are the ones who can have the sex. Here it is, folks. Let's get into this movie. When we look at the music first for Cafe Flesh, wow, what a soundtrack for this film. I mean, is there a soundtrack release for this film? There should be. All original music in the movie, and it's mentioned in the opening credits that this is a soundtrack made for this film. This soundtrack has a futuristic, electronic, 80s, dark, atmospheric, almost slightly industrial. It almost reminded me a little bit of the soundtrack from Rick Wakeman, I believe, from Crimes of Passion at times. A little bit at times. A little bit of Blade Runner at times, morphed into this world. A lot of mystery, a lot of late night in the mix, weird and captivating and rhythmic and and 80s groovy and or just 80s electronic, but in with this very very dark futuristic world around it. Um, it's the soundtrack is just unbelievable in here. I you can hear inspirations from other films that you've seen, but I've never really heard a soundtrack quite like this altogether. Really, wow, Cafe Flesh. I will tell you this, I believe that there is a snippet of moaning in this film that is in a Rob Zombie song, More Human Than Human. I was watching Cafe Flesh and all of a sudden my stomach dropped during during a piece of moaning in the movie. And I said, wait a minute, I think this is in a Rob Zombie song. So very interesting there. And I could be wrong on that, but I believe that there is a snippet in here that is from there. And that's what it sounded like to me, at least. So very, very interesting. When we look at the style of this film, this is a film of freaking style. This is a film where we are spending the majority of time at this cafe. And this cafe is putting on elaborate, unbelievable shows of sex. But each sex show at this dark and smoky cafe, this dark, sexually sci-fi, futuristic cafe in an industrial wasteland that almost reminds me a bit of that movie Hardware, a bit about the robot. But each show is a completely different theatrical experience, and this is where a lot of the times it would remind me of Forbidden Zone and things like that. It's a totally new world, where you'll have bizarre set pieces and characters and costumes and outfits and smoke and lighting and weird caricatures and weird props, really at times reminding me of Forbidden Zone, with these set pieces, and so artistic and so imaginative. And when we're not when we're not viewing the stage performances, the very theatrical stage performances at Cafe Flesh, we're kind of in this industrial wasteland where we have, this cascading white lighting in the darkness, of the night, in the darkness of Cafe Flesh, in the smoky darkness of Cafe Flesh. This is what a unique, you can get a piece. You see those characters in the film, in the smoke. What a unique industrial wasteland, X-rated, theatrical, artistic film. It's a film of characters. It's a film of dialogue. It's a film of character development. There's a great deal of dialogue in this film. There's a great deal of tension and pain in this film. There's a great deal of longing and fantasy in this film. There is a love story in this film that is very difficult. Desire. And there's a bartender in the film that tells interesting stories. There's poetry in this film. There's an impersonator in this film. There's a kind of a leader of Cafe Flesh called Moms. We have just a variety of characters. We have chickens on the wall. We have people in pain watching. I've reviewed a lot of Jess Franco films on this YouTube page as my favorite director, and there's always a nightclub act. It tends to be a Jess Franco staple in many regards, but Cafe Flesh, Cafe Flesh is, they're focused on the theatrical nightclub acts and theatrical performances, sex on stage, real sex on stage. Because this is the only place for these people who cannot have sex to embrace this world of sex. It's their only connection. It's their only lifeline to sex. But at the same time, it's painful because they can't actually climax or feel the finishing of their desires, um, masks and smoke and moans and different themes, from a housewife to a child, a housewife with a child, to office work, all different thematic fantasies. The different themes are different sexual fantasies on purpose at Cafe Flesh. The characters in this film, I mean, at times it almost reminded me of the horror film Near Dark. You know, like I mentioned, Hardware, and I also mentioned Blade Runner and Liquid Sky and Forbidden Zone. All of these worlds in here, just a fascinating set design at Cafe Flesh, not only on the stage but beyond the stage and behind the stage. The way the story unfolds, the way the sex unfolds. And I believe that we have Michelle Bauer in here. I was not aware that she was ever doing X-rated films, and in this film, Michelle Bauer of Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers fame and many of the kind of the 80s Scream Queen, and even latter portion, even doing some Jess Franco films in Jess Franco's latter shot on video period. So I believe this is Michelle Bauer in this film. Really looks like her, and she's not credited on the box here when they list the actors and actresses, but really, really interesting. Really wild world we have going on here. In terms of the sex of the film, this is some very surreal and theatrical sex. This is not your typical X-rated film. The sex scenes are not... they're not long. There are many sex scenes in the film theatrically because that's the only place that the sex takes place. But the sex scenes are not long, and they're very theatrical and weird and bizarre and stylistic and artistic, they play out in very artistic ways that I've never seen in this particular way before. Very, very interesting. We have, in terms of sex scenes, we have a lesbian, and we have multiple guys with a girl, and we have masturbation, and just very moaning and wild scenes and wall-to-wall music in this film. And also at the same time, as I mentioned, a lot of dialogue. Such a unique, bizarre, unreal X-rated film. And what a great double feature to watch this with the film Night Dreams from 1981, which I've also reviewed on this YouTube page. This is Cafe Flesh, folks, from 1982. Thank you so much for watching the 10 Room Bizarre YouTube page, where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more, like Cafe Flesh from 1982. Thank you so much, and good night.